All right, so thank you everyone for being here for the EMR Research Insights lunchtime learning session. This presentation series offers a unique opportunity for current and potential students, as well as faculty and staff, to gain insight into ongoing projects, research methodologies, and emerging trends. I'm Regina Garza-Mitchell, and I'm a faculty member here in the Evaluation, Measurement, and Research program. Our certificate and degree programs seek to develop scholars, evaluators, and leaders who have a comprehensive understanding and ability to integrate and utilize inquiry methods from multiple ontologies, epistemologies, paradigms to address research and evaluative questions directed toward understanding and solving pressing problems and contributing to the knowledge base that informs practice. The three dimensions of EMR are fully integrated into our MA and PhD programs, and we also have 3 certificate options available that focus on qualitative research, mixed methods, and evaluation for both online and on-campus enrollment. You can visit our website or contact any one of the faculty members to learn more. So this month, our featured speaker is Ernest Amoateng, an EMR PhD candidate. He will share some of the interesting work he's conducting toward his dissertation. And I'm really excited to see this because I'm on the committee. So I'm going to turn it over to Ernest now.
Thank you very much, Dr. Regina Michelle, for the opportunity. First of all, thanking everybody for coming. This is my presentation. It's a research journey I'm embarking on, and I want to thank you all for coming. So basically, it's AI and human scoring. And this is the agenda for today. I'll introduce the overall research program or the study, and then also talk about the validity argument I'm making. I'll give an overview of the first study, the second study, and then the third study, which is the focus for today's presentation. And then I'll explain why multi-group CFA. And then we move to the methods and then the analytic approach, results, interesting results, and then key findings and the conclusion. One thing I want to put across is that I don't want to be too statistical or more technical. So I'll try to kind of bring meaning to the numbers you see. So don't be bothered, especially if you are not a numbers person. Just bear with me. Most especially when I get to the conclusion or key findings, I'll make it more applicable for researchers and educators alike. So so bear with me with the statistics. Okay. So this is the overall research and then the continuity of studies. The first study, the focus is on AI and human rubric comparisons, and validity contribution is content. So I am using a qualitative methodology or approach. So I'm interviewing experts, and then we form themes out of the quality of rubrics that is seen for both AI and human. And then the quality is defined by three dimensions: the clarity and interpretability of the performance levels, the comprehensiveness of the core narrative traits, including those that reflect high order thinking skills. I'll talk about the data, so just an overview, and also the standards alignment. So study 2 is kind of AI and human scoring consistency. The validity contribution is on criterion-related validity, and obviously it's a quantitative study. So, and the metrics that I'll be using to ascertain whether there's consistency between AI and human scoring are ICC, TWK, and then I do some classification metrics. This is machine learning kind of metrics, precision recall F1. And then the last study, which is the focus of today's presentation, is on construct validity. Specifically, the focus is on structural and trait score equivalence between AI and human. And I'm looking at CFA, confirmatory factor analysis, and the measurement invariant testing. So that is the overall research that I'm doing. This is the validity argument I'm making across studies. Contemporary validity theory uses what we call the argument-based approaches, in which claims about a score, interpretation, and use must be supported with empirical evidence. And I'm using Keynes' interpretive use argument, we call it the IUA, to structure my studies, all the 3 studies. So I use it to structure and evaluate the validity, interpretation, and uses of AI and human constructed response narrative writing task to discuss. And within that framework, validity is kind of we examine the evidence in supporting validity based on 4 inferences according to the framework: scoring, generalization, extrapolation, and then implication or use. So when you look at the slide, the first study it is the foundational study before we think of scoring, before we think of generalization, before we think of use or implication. Per Keynes framework, we should be able to understand the conceptual or the content base of the thing, that the instrument that we use for scoring. And that is why the first study is a qualitative study that focuses on rubric quality between AI and human. So it also addresses construct representation, the higher order thinking skills, because the assessment is to measure students' higher order thinking skills. And when I get to the data, I'll explain the assessment. So when you look at the first study, the primary inference is domain representation inference. It's conceptual. So some people argue in Keynes' framework, the extrapolation talk about construct, but before extrapolation, there should be some, it's kind of linked to extrapolation, but conceptual inference. So that is why I name it. And then the second study primarily is a scoring inference, and it has a generalization inference as a support. The evidence that I'm looking forward is score agreement using those metrics, ICC, QWK, and then those classification consistency metrics, F1 precision, and the likes, and then stability across conditions. What is interesting about the second study is that there are 2 different rubrics. So there's a kind of manipulation. There are 2 different rubrics: a rubric that was designed by AI and a rubric that is designed by human, a rubric generated by AI and human. And study 1, that's it, compare the quality. Study 2, now let's use the rubric to ascertain whether there'll be divergence in scoring. So AI uses its own rubric to score and uses the human rubric to score. But the human piece is a reference group. So it doesn't mean that the human rubric and human scores are gold standard or the ultimate truth. No, when we get there, I'll explain. So study 3, basically the focus of this presentation is the structure of the score structure, comparability, and it's basically a construct-related evidence. And the primary inference based on the argument I'm making is generalization, whether the meaning of the score is comparable between AI and human. So rather than attempting to help all the inferences within a single study, what I've done is that I have advanced a programmatic validity argument, each study contributing to a unique yet a complementary source of evidence throughout the inference chain. And so before you evaluate scoring generalized inference, the validity argument requires that there should be a clearly articulated construct and domain specification. And that is what the first study is kind of doing. Now, the first study, the goal is just to explore whether an AI-based rubric generation approach can produce a coherent rubric that is sound and potentially actionable for low and high stakes use. Study 2 kind of evaluate the extent to which the AI-based scoring model operating under 2 rubric conditions produces scores that are comparable to human raters for the grade level and then the task. So the focus is on rubric level scoring agreement, classification consistency, and systematic scoring difference between the 2 scoring groups, AI and human. Now, the focus of this presentation, specifically, I'm examining whether trait score that is derived from a shared rubric framework reflects the same underlying latent structure between human and AI scoring system. So when I talk of AI, I know those AI is very broad. I'm talking of AI-based scoring system, which uses the GPT, specifically the GPT-4o model. When I say model, when I get to the measurement model, I don't want to confuse the model. So for AI, I'm talking about AI-based scoring. I won't call model because I'll talk about model when I go into the details of the measurement model I'm using to ascertain whether trait scores are comparable. Okay. Measurement invariance, now from agreement to meaning. Why measurement invariance matters? There are many studies that I've seen about this automated essay scoring. Now, you know, with the way AI is kind of doing things, people are kind of seeing whether AI can really match human. So what they do is that they use those agreement metrics, like talk about the QWK, the ICC, to see whether, and use the human component as a reference to see whether AI matches the numbers, whether it is too close. So agreement is fine, but it is not enough. And that is why this presentation is important. That is why measurement invariance matters. Measurement invariance is established if an individual's probability of an observed score, what you see from this, the score of an individual, does not depend on their group membership, whether it's coming from human or AI, conditional on their true score. And that is why measurement invariance is necessary. We are moving from just the observational score or the observable score to the meaning of the score, the true latent factor. And that is why measurement invariance is of a necessity. So measurement invariance is applied in this study, in this presentation I'm talking about, to test whether scores assigned to AI and human raters demonstrate equivalent measurement of the same latent writing qualities construct with comparable factor structure, and thus if it can be interpreted on the same scale. So the idea here is that measurement invariance is acting like a fairness check, ensuring that AI scoring preserves the meaning and not just agreeing, as other studies have done. So here, agreement is not equivalent, it's not equal to equivalence. We are dealing with equivalence here. So validity does not depend on accuracy alone, but the construct meaning. Why multi-group CFA? So confirmatory factor analysis, CFA, model has been used to identify the relationship between an observed indicator or indicators and a latent variable or variables. So when I'm talking of model, this is what I'm talking about. So the model is the CFA, the model. And I'm modeling a latent factor, when you see from the slides, which is writing quality to an observable indicators. So the assessment, when I get to the data, the assessment, the scores are coming from these four indicators: ideas, organization, style, and convention. So I'm using CFA to model the latent writing quality. The assessment is about students writing, narrative writing. So we want to see whether the quality of the writing that we want to see as a result of the observable scores we see, that's the relationship I'm building with the CFA. So a one factor, when you look at the slides, I am modeling a one-factor unidimensional measurement model to represent the latent trait and the observable indicators. So here, measurement invariance testing has been commonly employed using the multi-group. It's multi-group because there are two groups. There are humans and there's AI. So I'm using that to model that. So using multi-group factor analysis to ascertain whether the latent trait or construct, which is the writing quality, it's same for both groups. And if it's same, it has implications. So when we get there, you get the results, you understand. Now, I brought in these slides to let you know that I'm using a common scoring framework for the scoring, the human rubric. So the AI uses the same rubric for scoring, human uses the same rubric. And previous study, my second study, has even given a good finding that even rubric has no effect on AI scoring, because the second study, I used two different rubrics, one that the AI created by itself, the engine itself, and then one by the human. And the results from the previous studies demonstrate that rubric source has little effect on scoring divergence for AI and human. However, for measurement invariance to hold, there should be a common scoring framework. That's why I selected the human rubric. So this isolates scoring source effects and evaluate whether AI reproduces the same latent factor structure that humans infer from the rubric without confounding the rubric origin effect. I'll sit here for some time because this is where the methods and the analytic approach is, so that you understand the numbers and everything. So first of all, the data I use is I have 1,569 student constructed response to an essay test. It's a narrative writing task. The task is a narrative writing task. The grade is 7 grade students. And these constructed responses were obtained from a competition that were organized by William Howlett Foundation in collaboration with certain consortium, the consortium for school network, the interoperability framework on association, and the task. There were different genres. You have narrative writing, argumentative writing, but I use the narrative writing task. And these tasks primarily were sourced from state-level testing bodies like PAC, like Smarter Balance. These people are agencies that see to the summative, assessment of students at the state level. So these were actual students' responses, the end of year exams, to determine whether students have met state standards, particularly the common core state standards. So that's where the essay, that's where the data is coming from. So I'm just giving the background to know where the data is coming from. And these tasks kind of represent both classroom and state level. While the source is state level, the foundations, the Hewlett Foundation, where the data is coming from, their goal was that, so there was a competition and they employ machine learning experts to see whether we can use this type of AI engines to score. So that was the essence of the competition by the Hewlett Foundation. But they just wanted to bring some of these engines or technology in the classroom situation. So the tasks kind of represent a typical classroom teacher giving an ELA task, write about patients, write about this. So it's both classroom related and then state level requirement. And then the scoring, for the AI scoring, let me just give you a little background because that was done in previous study. So with the AI scoring, I use the GPT model, specifically GPT-4o, and I paid for it because to be able to access the model, you need to pay for it. And so you give a user-structured prompt engineering protocol, you give the model, I use their API to have access to the model, and I work on the clouds. I use Google Colab because you cannot use because of the enormity of the data, 1,569 S's, and you are giving it to a machine to score, you need higher levels of power. And so I use the cloud version of Google Colab, and then I use the API. So I access the the AI model from its API, and then you need to pay. You need to pay for your input and everything, and I pay some amount of money for the scoring. So the model is GPT-4o, and then you give the instruction, you give the rubric, and to score. And one of the things that I wanted to see whether AI is very consistent. The people are talking, when I talk AI, I'm talking about the GPT-based scoring. People have many idea about this AI score and everything. So I did a lot of manipulation, and that's not the focus, but just to give you an overview to see whether it was consistent. The temperature was 0.30, and I used 2 different rubrics. It was 32. And then I could see the consistency, and I asked the AI, if you give a score of 1 or 2 or 3, could you tell me the reason? And you could see that the reasons that AI is giving is just the reason that is in the rubric. So the AI model, the AI-based scoring was consistent in applying the rubric in scoring. And the scale was a 4-point scale from 0 to 3 on these observable indicators: ideas, organization, style, and conventions. So that's the rubric convention. So it models my measurement model, where I have the latent writing quality, and then I have the observable indicators. And then the framework, I use the multi-group CFA like I explained before. And then the estimator was, the estimator is I use the maximum likelihood, the robust maximum likelihood, and then the software was Lavan in R. Okay, now this is the measurement invariance methods or steps. So measurement invariance typically proceeds in levels, okay? And each step increases the constraint and thus increases the psychometric burden on the model. The first model is configurable, the second is metric, and then the third is scalar. So if full invariance holds, we can interpret that AI and human scores are representing the same construct, the writing quality. When you look at the configurable model, which is the foundational model or the first step in measurement invariance testing, what it does is that you confirm that the overall factor structure, what is the number of factors or factor in this presentation, there's only one factor in which the indicators kind of associate is same across group, whether AI and human. So when configural invariance is met, we can say that there's an equal factor structure. AI and human have the same structural equivalence. The second model is the metric, which sometimes called the weak invariance. So this is the stage of measurement invariance testing where factor loadings are constrained to be equal across groups. So, and it tells whether the latent construct has the same unit of measurement, the scale, across groups. And it allows for a valid comparisons of the variance and covariances. The last one, which is the scalar invariance or the scalar invariance, which is a strong invariance, ensures that item intercepts or the thresholds are kind of equivalent across groups. It indicates that for the same latent factor score, individuals from the different groups have the same observed score. And violation in any of these levels may indicate that AI and human scoring differ, not just in the scale, but also on the construct they measure and the way they weigh the criteria. So that this is the measurement invariance levels of testing for the measurement invariance. Now, these are my hypotheses for this presentation. Actually, these hypotheses came from two main questions. So to what extent do AI and human assigned scores demonstrate configural, metric, and scalar invariance across the four analytic rubric dimensions of a narrative writing quality as estimated by the multi-group CFA? That's the main question. The second question is that when full invariance is not supported, it's likely, mostly in social sciences and assessment, full invariance is mostly not likely, hardly. So when full invariance is not supported, which specific measurement parameters exhibit that partial invariance? And what do these patterns indicate about the differences in score functioning between the AI and the human? So the first hypothesis I'm testing is that the same underlying factor structure will be supported by both AI and the human. The second is that factor loadings for the analytic writing traits, ideas, organization, style, and conventions will be comparable across the scoring sources. Scoring sources means AI and human, indicating that there is similar relationships between the observed scores and the latent construct between the two groups. The third hypothesis I'm testing is the scalar non-invariance or the full scalar invariance. So full scalar invariance will not be supported. That is my hypothesis, indicating a systematic difference in score level between the AI and human scoring. And then the last one is partial. So if full variance is not supported, then is partial going to support? Now, releasing the constraints will result. So partial means you have to release the constraints of some indicators that are problematic or really not working well. So releasing the constraints, will the result be acceptable, consistent with partial invariance? So these are the hypotheses I'm testing. So the results, the next slides, I'm going to show you the results based on these hypothesis testing. Now, first of all, let me come here. So when you look at the multi-group CFA in this slide, I use a single CFA for each group. So first, I model a single CFA for each group, AI and human. So the results here is for human. So a single measurement model was modeled for the AI, for the human group, and this is the factor loadings. So when you look at the figure here, you could see that the relationship between the writing quality, the latent factor or trait, and the observable indicators, ideas, convention, style, and organization. When you look at the numbers, they are the standardized factor loadings. You could tell that they are pretty okay. They are kind of loading well on the latent factor, which is the writing quality. From IDS is 0.86, organization 0.95, style is 0.81. Convention is kind of a little off, but that's okay. But you could see that the lines are very deep in for all. I just want you to have an idea of this. And when I get to some of the numbers, I'll explain some of the things. So this is how the single group CFA for human looks like. Let's go to the AI. This is how the AI looks like. Very pretty well on ideas and organization, 0.93, 0.95, style a bit. Conventions looks a bit off. So when you look at this figure, So all the lines, the first 3 lines are very deep in from style, organization, ideas, but convention is kind of faded. So it tells you that convention is not kind of loading well when it comes to the AI scoring system with respect to the latent writing quality, right? So that is the single modeling for each, single group CFA. Now, the next slide, I'm going to show you what the multi-group looks like. And then we're going to use the invariance, the level of invariance testing, the configural, the metric to the scalar to ascertain whether our hypotheses are really working or not working. Something interestingly was happening in the results, and I'll tell you. But let's move on. Now, this is now the multi-group CFA. So we have the model, and we have, these ones are called the CFI, the TLI, the RMSEA, the ASM. These are index, the model comparative index. These are the index. The CFI is the comparative fit index. The RMSE is the root mean square of error of approximation, and then SRMR are standardized root mean square residual. So all these are fixed indices. So this results, and I'm showing you the fixed, this is how the fixed indices looks like for each of the levels of measurement in variance. So the configural and metric models fit reasonably well. I'll tell you how to tell whether these fixed indices are really working for each of the models, because we use a threshold to tell. But when you look at the numbers as it is, just look at it. You could see that for CFI, configural 0.9, metric 0.9, but there was a decrease, a sharp decrease at the scalar level. When you look at the TLI, the same thing. You look at RMSEA. I'll talk about this. Just look at the RMSEA, the root mean standardized error, root mean square residual. Look at these values carefully, and I'll tell something about it. And then when you look at the SRMR, similar pattern. So for RMSEA and SRMR, at the scalar level or invariance, it is increasing. But CFI and TLI is decreasing. Look at the scalar. So CFI, the comparative fit index, and then the Tucker-Lewis index is decreasing at the scalar level, but increasing with RMSEA and SRMR at the scalar level. And I'll tell you what those things mean. So meaning, when you look at this fit, a configural and the metric models fit reasonably well, meaning AI and human raters conceptualize the same latent writing construct, and their factor loadings are roughly kind of equivalent. However, the fit drops sharply at the scalar level. CFI and TLI decline, like I'm saying, while RMSE rises. This indicates that the AI score distribution compress variance and slightly shift the mean structures. Now, the model judgment, why I'm able to tell all these things is based on, we follow a decision threshold. So I use Chan and Resville 2002 threshold or cutoff, and also use Chan 2007 cutoff. So where there's a change, when you see a change in CFI, look at the second table. So the baseline model, which is configural, which is there's no constraints. When you look at the change in CFI from configural to metric, you could see minus 0.0192. And the change from metric to scalar, you could see negative 0.3049. What do those numbers mean? Based on decision thresholds, when a change in CFI, so we are using the comparative fit index now here, when a change in CFI is less than 0.010 and RMSE is less than 0.015, it indicates a support for the more constrained model. So configural is no constraints. So we are checking configural and metric. Metric is the more constrained model. If the change in CFI is less than 0.01, you can say that metric invariance is supported in this regard. But when you look at this number, somebody will argue it's not really supported because the threshold says that it should be less than 0.010. But this is okay. Largely, there's metric invariance is supported. There's an argument, but I'll tell you what I did and what these numbers, some issues that is happening with these numbers. And the truth is that the measurement model that I modeled, the latent writing quality and the observable indicators, it's a simple model with few degrees of freedom. And when you look at the RMSEA, these numbers are alarming. It tells you that something is happening. These numbers should be less than 0.1 and it should be even 0.4. These are great. So does it mean that my measurement model, the one factor model, is not really working well? No. There are many reasons to it, and I'll explain it in the other slides for you to know. But at this point, I want you to know that based on the thresholds, metric invariance kind of largely you can say there is a support, but it's arguable. Scalar invariance automatically is not supported. At this point, the model was struggling because the change in CFI is huge. So configural invariance, which is same pattern loadings, was supported based on these results. Just look at these results because that's the baseline. So the latent structure was similar across AI and human. This supports the use of single writing quality factor for both. So there's a single writing quality factor. When you look at the configural, the factor loadings invariant, so largely. And what it means is that the relationship between the latent construct, which is the writing quality, and the observable indicators is same between groups, but it's still arguable. So what it means is that the relative importance and interpretation of traits, the importance that humans give to ideas, organization, style, and conventions, AI does same. The AI-based scoring system does same. That's what it means when metric invariance is achieved or supported. Now, the scalar invariance, which from these results kind of struggling, the model was struggling. So what it means is that it wasn't supported. Scalar invariance equal intercept was not supported. So the large change in the CFI indicate that there's a violation of the intercept equality because there's a constraint. I told you these levels of invariance testing is a result of constraints. At the scalar level, we are constraining that the intercepts are equal, but here we can't say that it's equal because the measurement model kind of struggle at this level. So it indicates that there's violation of the intercept equality that we're modeling. I'll show you some graphical representation of these numbers, and then I'll tell you another interesting part about these numbers. Just take note, have a view of what I've just said in the previous slides. So this is the fit indices graphically by the invariance level. So what this figure illustrates is that it tells how the model field changes across the levels of invariance. So at the configural level, you could see that both AI and human raters share the same underlying factor structure for writing quality. They are same. At the configural level, you see they are same. So the construct in itself is consistent. When we constrain the factor loadings at the metric level, the fit remains acceptable. You know, they say almost uniform, it looks uniform. So look at it from configural to metric. So the colors represent the fit indices. So green is CFI, don't know whether that is violet, red, blue, I mean, those ones. So yeah, so at the configural to metric, you could see that there's a little, it looks normal, like uniform, but there's a little elevation, just a little. So that's why the numbers there were not kind of meeting the threshold kind of so well. So meaning that, but it's okay, it's acceptable, meaning both systems weight the rubric trait similarly. But look at the scalar level. There was a sharp decline. You could see that CFI and TLI came down, looking at the fit index. And RMSEA and SRMR were increasing. So this just to buttress the numbers that we saw, how they look like. Now, because scalar invariance, which is the full scalar, was not supported, now my second question is to that there be partial invariance. So I tested for partial invariance. What I did is that because style, when you look at the measurement model from the single factor model, you could tell that style and conventions were not so aligned with the latent trait, because I mean the standard loadings, the factor loadings were not so strong enough. So partial invariance. So because style and convention showed greatest misalignment, partial invariance was kind of tested by freeing the intercept of style and conventions. And I freed style and convention not because of just the factor loadings, but I did something that we call the diagnostic. I used the modification indices, and everything was pointing to the fact that style and conventions were non-invariant indicators in the measurement model. The latent writing quality and then the fall indicators. All indices, all the modification indices were pointing to the fact that these two, you can call them items or indicators, were kind of non-invariant. So I decided to test for partial invariance and release release the constraint for these items or indicators. So this slide shows that after releasing the constraints, after testing for partial invariance by freeing the intercept for style and conventions, the model fit improved. Can you see? Look at it. Look at the chi-square. So from these numbers are also huge. It's also another thing I'll explain later. So the chi-square from 1,140 to 296, there was a sharp decline when I tested for the partial invariance. And you could see that the CFI has moved from 0.62 in the scalar invariance, the results we saw previously, which is also here, 0.62 to 0.89. And CFI is more acceptable when it is 9 from the threshold, if it's greater than 0.90. If it's even more preferred when it is greater than 0.95. But here it is 0.89. Still you can argue. But what I want you to know is that there's been an improvement when we release we free style, the intercept for style and conventions. So you can say that partial invariance is kind of supported because full invariance was not supported because of the two indicators, style and convention. So it indicates that the main divergence between AI and human scoring lies in how these two indicators or traits are calibrated at the mean level. So AI is using a different internal mechanism for stylistic and mechanic writing as opposed to human. That is what the results is trying to say. In other words, AI aligns well with humans in the underlying construct of writing quality, but systematically interprets the stylistic expression of students' writing and their conventions differently. Because when we release the constraint of style and conventions, the model kind of improved. The partial scalar invariance was kind of supported based on these results you see on the slides. And an improvement in CFI, you can see the CFI as an improvement, alongside a reduction in chi-square, model better reflects that the structure of the data compared to the full model. And so the outcome kind of support partial scalar invariance, meaning that while AI and human raters share the same factor structure, their score scales are not fully equivalent. This slide is the same thing. It explains, this shows the information criteria per invariance level. So when you look at it, I'm using the AIC and BIC as the model. So values change across the levels. Both criteria remain largely stable from configural to metric. So configural to metric, it means still there's a support for configural and metric. It was relatively stable, indicating a loss of model parsimony when factor loadings were constrained. However, there was a sharp increase. You see the sharp increase to scalar. This pattern confirmed that adding the constraint substantially worsens the model fit. Right. Now, this is my interest now. Look at this results. If you could just think of the results that we saw previously, and now look at this result. There's been a tremendous changes in the estimates, and I'll tell you what was happening. Initially, the initial results, the one-factor model, the chi-square were huge, the RMSEA were huge, there were bigger numbers, and as a researcher, I'll be curious because it tells that the one-factor model is kind of struggling somewhere. So the initial one-factor model kind of exhibited a poor fit specifically in terms of the RMSEA, the standardized, the root mean square error of approximation. Even though it was, look, let's go to the previous slides. From the past year, the RSME was 0.27. Look at it, 0.27. Even though it was acceptable, the CFI kind of increase, the RMSE was 0.27, it's not enough. And so I did what we call the corrected error. So this result shows what corrected error means. Corrected error means, I'll explain it. What it means is that I kind of co-vary the residuals for the two indicators that I constrained, the conventions and style. Right. So the one factor model exhibited a poor fit, especially because of RMSE, because it was 0.27 in the previous results you saw. When I inspected the correlation metrics for the data for the two groups, I saw a near redundant relationship between IDS and organization, these two indicators. And when you see such thing, it is an indication that there's redundancy. And when there's redundancy, there's the likelihood that RMSE will skyrocket. It will shoot. And that is why we saw the results here. The RMSE were very huge here. But when we come here, the RMSE have sharply declined. Why? Because of the corrected error I did. Lowering, so allowing the residuals of IDS and organization, which from the inspection, they were kind of highly related. Because in the AI, in the human group, they were more greater than 0.8. And in statistics, they will call it their multicollinearity. It's just redundancy. What it means is that if I force a single latent factor, the model will struggle, especially the RMSEA. Because the data is showing us that IDS and organizations, they are not too distinct. They are almost the same thing. And that is statistics. And my justification for doing the correlated error is not just based on statistics, not just the inspection that there is higher correlation for both groups on these two indicators, but also based on theory. So there is this, this is a writing task. And theory suggests that IDS, the what or the content is inextricably linked to the how the IDS is expressed. And that is why it is important that I model the correlated error so that the numbers, the results will be very valid for both groups. The good news is that there was consistency for both groups in terms of the modeling, the correlated error. There was consistent. So statistically, it is appropriate. Theoretically, it is appropriate. So, and this modification, the modification of these two indices is statistically justified, like I said, by the high modification indices and the significant reduction of the chi-square. Look at the chi-square, 0.28. Look at the previous one here. They were huge. Look at the chi-square here, 435.304 and scalar 31440. But here, it is 847 for the full scalar, and then the partial is 390. So I'm sharing this for you to know. Somebody asked, they are different results. They are not different results. You have to correlate the error to account for the redundancy of the two indicators that are looking like same in writing assessment and even statistically based on the correlation matrix. They were AI has greater than 0.8, humans greater than 0.8. So there's that redundancy effect. So it's a local strain, and we need to account theoretically the overlap. So there's an overlap between content, which is the IDS, and the structural coherence, which is the organization. So a correlated error was added. That's what I did here for the two indicators. And we know, like I said, theory, effective writing requires not only substantive content, but also coherent structuring. And these dimensions, naturally, they share variance beyond the general writing factor. So hence, specifying the correlated error was really important. it indicates, it reflects their conceptual interdependence. And here you could tell that configural model is now 0.97. Great, massive improvement over the previous configural method of 0.26. It suggests that once the redundancy between the IDS and organization was accounted for, the one-factor structure or model is actually quite healthy in this modeling. The metric invariance, now look at the metric invariance. Look at the change in CFI. We use thresholds, change in CFI. It is 0.01. Marginally, the cut is, it should be less than -0.1. So marginally, and it is supported. So metric invariance is supported. While it's slightly above the strict of -0.01 cutoff, I mean, it's debatable. It is much closer than before and suggests that factor loadings are relatively stable across human and, across humans and AI. So yeah, let's go to the hypothesis, how the results support my hypothesis. So the first one was a configural invariance. It is supported because CFI, the comparative fit index assumed, is now 0.99. The one-factor structure works for both groups. When you look at the metric, it's supported because the change in CFI is within the reasonable range to suggest that loadings are comparable. Scalar invariance, which is scalar non-invariance, is the change in CFI is -0.85, a massive drop confirming scores are not directly comparable. And then partial, CFI recovered to 0.5. So partial invariance was supported. It moved to 0.5 after freeing style and conventions. What are the key findings? What this means, what all these numbers means is that AI and humans are talking about the same thing, particularly for IDS and convention. But AI and human scholars conceptualize narrative writing quality the same. They see the same underlying structure, meaning that the construct in itself is comparable. However, for some traits like style and convention, AI and human scores assign systematic different score levels when the underlying construct level is even the same. So it means that the origin of the scale for these two traits differ. AI, what it means is that AI scoring preserves the construct meaning of narrative writing quality, but does not replicate human levels without adjustment. So having established partial invariance from the results, a comparison of the latent means is important. So now the observed scores, if so maybe AI is 2, human is 3, what does it mean? So we've established from this study, from this presentation, that partial invariance is supported. So there should be a caution, especially with style and conventions, but AI and humans are comparable on content, which is the IDS on organization. But I did a secondary analysis to now look at the latent mean itself, whether it is true. And I didn't show that results here, but just as an addition, because that one will allow for a comparison that is uncontaminated by the measurement bias that we saw from the results and in style and convention. And even after accounting for the fact that the rubric style and convention function differently, and I tried to look at the latent mean, the truth is that AI generated scores were significantly lower on the underlying factor of writing quality. So the difference was like -1.5 units. So take it as this. On a shared rule for IDS and organization, on a shared rule of quality, AI is 1.5 units more severe. So this talks of how severe, how harsh AI is when it's scoring, especially some of these traits. It's more severe. The 1.5 means it's more severe. And it confirms the findings in previous study where there was systematic difference. So AI, it also supports the AI behavior. It is very conservative. AI hardly gives higher scores, especially the 3. It mostly in the average, the middle class. And that is what AI has been doing. And that's what the results show. So the conclusion is that your takeaway is that the study has tested whether AI sees writing quality the same way as human does, and giving the same student essay to both groups. We found out that AI and humans agree on what makes a good essay. That is the structure and the weighting configural and metric or supported. That's what it means. AI and humans agree that this is a good essay. They do not agree on the grading scale. What it means, the intercept, that is where the scalar was crashed. So it means that scoring meaning is largely comparable between AI and human at the construct level and at the relational level, but not fully comparable at the score level for all the traits. If you want to compare for all the traits, we need to exercise caution. We need to do some recalibration or adjustment, especially for style and convention, because AI sees stylistics and mechanics different as humans sees it. What does it mean to educators alike and everybody? When you are using AI to grade your students, what it means is that we must be aware of rater bias, because AI can be biased, especially for style and convention. Even if AI understands the rubric you're using to score, it may apply a harsher or a different baseline than the human teacher would. So you cannot simply just swap AI rater to human raters, except that the scores mean, even though the scores mean the same thing, especially for technical areas like style and convention. I think time is running. Practical, ethical, and policy consideration. This presentation ensures an ethical checkpoint. Measurement invariance is an ethical checkpoint. It helps us to know, to ascertain that AI scoring system treats all students' work under the same construct definitions used by both human raters. And without it, we risk reinforcing unseen biases and penalizing writing styles. So for policymakers and testing agencies, what it means that the evidence supports interpretable AI systems that not only match human accuracy, but also represent human meaning. And for policy implications, what it means is that AI scoring should not be used out of the box to replace human graders because of the negative 1.55 severity gap. The true meaning of writing quality, the difference between AI and human is negative 0.155. So we should be careful. What about rubric reform? When using AI for scoring, we should place more trust in IDS on organization scores, as these show the most structural stability between humans and AI. Validity argument. The findings have successfully shown that generalization inference, the idea that an AI score can represent the human judgment, is currently not so strong due to the lack of scalar invariance. There's a partial invariance. In practical terms, the latent mean, which I talk about, the negative 1.55 for the groups, is much straighter grader. AI is much straighter grader than humans. So just imagine turning a student essay. The human rater reads it and say, this is a solid 3 out of 4. The AI will say that this is a 1.5 out of 4. This is what the results means. So in conclusion, this is a closing message. AI scoring can mirror human reasoning, yes, but true validity lies in preserving meaning and not just merely matching numbers. I thank you for your attention.
Does anybody have any questions or comments?
Yeah, a quick one for my senior brother Ernest. Ernest, you can hear me?
Yes, I'm trying to see. Oh, where's my? Yes, I can hear you. Please talk. Go ahead.
Right. Thank you so much for your presentation.
I can't see the video. Okay, I can hear you. Please go ahead.
Yeah, very, very in-depth and very excellent. Thank you so much. So a quick one. So you did mention about comparing rubrics that are being scored by AI and that also by humans. That is exactly what your study is about. So you are looking at machines and then humans scoring and how they differ.
Yes.
So here the issues of transparency and fairness comes up. So I just want to find out, how can you ensure that AI scoring decisions remain transparent and fair, especially, and you did even mention that, especially in cases where they diverge from human judgments? And what processes can you put in place to ensure that there's human review and correction?
Thank you very much for your question. I think my presentation answers it. The measurement invariance testing is the right fairness check. That's why I said agreement is not equal to equivalence. Now we are moving from numbers. People have done AI scoring where they are just matching numbers. This presentation moved from just matching numbers to talk about the meaning of the scores. And from the results, partial invariance, it means that AI is comparable, all right, but we need to exercise caution because when it comes to stylistic and mechanic traits, it struggles. And that is why partial invariance was supported. When you want to go into more into machine learning, where the consistency, I did that in study 2. And so it is out of scope for this presentation. Study 2, I did those pilot testing and see the consistency. And I can tell you that there was consistency. But for fairness check and everything, this study, that is why this study is really important, because it serves as a fairness check to tell whether there's meaning out of the observable scores we see.
Okay. Quick one before, just a quick one. So on your results section, okay, you, especially the one on the multiple group CFE, the model fit. Yeah, I was interested in knowing how you calculated the change in CFI values.
Oh, when you look at, I can see, let me stop sharing. Oh, okay, yeah, sorry, thank you. So,
if you can quickly go back to your results, you had three there: the single group human, the single group AI, and then there was a third one in the multiple group CFI.
Let me share my screen again. Forgive me, my computer is okay. Share a screen. Let me know if you see you can see. Oh no, can you see my screen? Can you see the slides?
Not yet.
Okay, I'm using. So sorry, just a moment. Share screen. Okay, let me do this. I think this one will be. Please, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay.
So quickly flip to your results. The one on the multiple group CFE model fit.
Okay, look at it. So this is it.
No. This is the correct.
It's the same as so this is the corrected form. So this one, okay. This one.
Yeah, here.
Okay.
The change in CFI, yeah.
So it's just 0.948 minus 0.929. So these are CFI values. Can you see? You get this value. So at the configure, at the base level, the invariance is the CFI is 0.948. And I've told you that how we measure the level of invariance. So the previous model is less constrained. The other model comparison is more constrained. Metric is more constrained. This is just not constrained at all. That's the baseline model to ascertain structural equivalence. And the CFI is 0.948, and this is 0.929. So when you change the difference, we just subtract mathematically. You are getting 0.092. That's what it means.
Yeah, so the negative number was for what I was, because 948 minus 9.929, should it be negative?
Yeah.
It's 13 hours.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
All right. Thank you.
I'm just going to interrupt to say it's 1 o'clock now, but you do have a couple other questions and comments in the chat. So if anybody wants to stay for a few minutes, if you're able to stay, we can answer those. Otherwise, we'll have to call it a day.
Hello.
I'm sorry if I was rushing
Ernest.
too much, but there's a whole lot of things. My work is a lot. I'm tired.
Ernest,
Ernest, you did a wonderful job.
Thank you. Please go ahead with the questions. I keep, and Willa, your hand is up. Yeah. Okay, Aaron, go ahead.
Yeah, so you did a very good presentation. I really understand your metrics and the entire study. I think it's a good work. But I was just curious. I realized that you used essays. So I wanted to find out how many raters you use for scoring of the essays to ensure consistency.
Oh, okay. That's a good. For the human, there were 2 human raters. AI is just one. AI is just one rater. So I mean, just one. They're using the GPT-based scoring, and I kind of combine their scores. averaging them, use the mean average. And so the scale looks like it's an ordinal scale, all right? But the levels, so the threshold, there are 4 levels. It's assumed I use the measure, the maximum likelihood, the robust maximum likelihood assumes that the scaling is continuous. I mean, and it's in literature, if you have a scale of 4 and above, you can assume it's continuous. So that is why when I average the human score, it makes sense. I mean, because the scale is just an ordinal. So yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
I'm going to bring it back to a question in the chat that was overlooked. It said, I am also curious how you can ensure fairness with AI evaluating when AI tends to build upon previous prompts to produce future predictions. So there might be a risk of AI being influenced to evaluate essay 2 after reading essay 1.
So the AI, so the AI is not just evaluating the essay. The AI is evaluating the essay based on a scoring, a standardized tool. So in my approach to ensure, that's why, so in study 2, when the AI was scoring, I asked the AI, give me reason for your score. And the reason should match the rubric. It's okay, I gave 2 because when I look at the writing, based on the rubric, I mean, a score of 0 has the description, what it means to score 0, what it means to score 1, what it means to score 3. And AI was able to tell you all those things. So I understand the point of AI can look at a student or a previous essay. But in my study, AI will not use a previous because it scores independently. It doesn't score at a go. It scores each essay independently based on the rubric.
Are you, may I ask a follow-up to that?
Yeah.
Are you resetting the AI every time you put in a new essay?
No.
I'm speaking from experience just because I've been curious how it would compare to how I evaluate my students.
Okay.
And there have been times where it would evaluate a student, but it would cite another student's report. So it would start to get confused and I would have to clarify with it.
Yeah.
But is that going to keep everything consistent?
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, and that is why you need to give reason. So in my approach, in the modeling, in the scoring, so if AI is messing up, the reason you can tell from the reasoning, right? How it is reasoning based on using the rubric. But I mean, I can tell you of a fact that for consistency, internally AI is very strong, especially for rubric-based assessment. When the rubric is very clearly specified and you give a good prompt. So sometimes people is the prompt, sometimes they're prompting, right? How you prompt it is also tell. If you don't tell AI to use the rubric, it is going to mess you up. Yeah. And you can give it, I mean, so I also kind of did some experiment with different prompt scales where I'm straight on the prompt and I'm not so straight. That is not the focus of this presentation. That is study 2. I did all these mechanisms in study 2. And so when I'm doing my final presentation for my defense, I want to call all of you to come and listen to what the study 2 really did in terms of the AI scoring. But for here, it's just on construct validity. And yeah.
Right, since we are over time, I just want to thank everybody for being here. And Ernest, thank you for a great presentation. I think you've started a conversation that will be ongoing for quite some time.